You have to be willing to speak up for what you want and what your needs are so you can thrive and be the best version of you that you can be. Because at the end of the day, nobody is going to do it for you. And I wish that weren't the case, but unless you stand up for you, nobody else is going to take the lead and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this for you because I can. It's very rare you're going to find that. And ultimately, people are just going to completely avoid it or forget. And even when it comes to, accommodations in general, I would say, and again, this is personal experience, but also professionally, I would say if you have diabetes, I would try to get accommodations with the testing center at the university. If you're in school or if you're in high school, get a 504 plan, right? There should be something in place because again, level playing field. If you have a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar during a test, is it fair for you to be functioning at, a fraction of your normal brain capacity while everybody else is doing totally fine? I don't think so. Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode. What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast. And today I've got a situation that is really frustrating as a whole for the diabetes population because of the public's lack of knowledge when it comes to education surrounding diabetes. And it's a very real situation. We've got a patient right now going through the exact type of situation I'm about to describe to you. The same thing happened to me way back in the day when I was in college, and it was super frustrating. So I want to make sure I break it down. So number one, in the event that you're in college, you have a kid who's about to go to college, you don't end up falling into this situation because it's not great. And then number two, to just really emphasize the need for advocacy, because we all know it's necessary, but sometimes we need a real life example to really drive that point home. And so in this situation, again, I'm using my example. There's someone right now going through exactly the same type of thing, and it's driving me nuts. So once upon a time, I went off to college. I lived on campus. And when you live on campus, that typically means you are required to have some sort of meal plan, right? Which on the surface seems reasonable. Hey, you got to eat. You got to make sure you're in there. You get so many meals per week or whatever. And there's different choices. Theoretically, you could do okay from a blood sugar standpoint, right? You can go in there, you can pick what you want, etc. And for perspective, when I was in high school, my blood sugars were okay. We didn't have the technology that we have now. Like there really were no CGMs. They were in their infancy and they were not very accurate. So I didn't wear one. I was pricking my finger a bunch. I was on a pump, but there were no algorithms. So my A1C was hanging out right around 7. So let's just say for sake of simplicity, it was 7.0. And so I go off to school. And you'd think, the classic, I don't know if it's an old school thing now, but the freshman 15 where you have burgers and you have fries and you have pizza and you have cookies and all sorts of food you've never had access to before because you were living at home and now you're on a campus and no one can tell you what to do. I quite frankly had the complete opposite situation. I went off to college and I was like, I want to make great choices and I want to feel good and I want my body fueled right. I was eating better than I was at home. I was getting, a wrap and I would get 2 protein sources in it. And I would go get extra grilled chicken and I would go get a salad loaded up with a ton of veggies on one plate and then get another plate with my protein. So I was making pretty solid choices for, an 18, 19-year-old. And the most alarming part of all of this is I'm making these choices that are reasonable, right? Of course. Am I still having some carbs? Of course. Am I still having a little bit of fun? Of course. I don't think I actually opened the dessert container the entire time I was there, by the way. I just would like to point this out. I never had a dessert from that dining hall. And I never really ate at the other place. Like, they have, some campuses have crazy food these days, but, maybe you have a Chipotle on campus or something like that. I don't think I ever ate at the restaurants per se, or the Starbucks or whatever. I just ate in the dining hall. My A1C at the end of the first year, and this is to, number one, to humanize, but number two, to recognize this is the gravity of the situation. Despite doing everything in my power at the time to thrive, my A1C started out at 7.0. The end of my first year, it was 8.6. And yes, there's obviously certain situations that can drive that are outside of just the food. But think about the food perspective, right? You're on campus, you're in a dining hall, you are effectively eating out for every single meal. Yes, there's certain things you can do to get in your own control, right? Where, okay, I'm going to go get breakfast. I'm going to go ask if they have an omelet person, I'm going to ask them to go make omelets for me. Or, I'm going to make sure I load up on these veggies, or I'm going to try to measure this or that. But theoretically, if you go to any of the quote prepared areas where it's like, oh, look, there's lasagna, and I'm making all this up. There's lasagna, there's tacos, there's build a burrito station, whatever, right? You are still at the mercy of whoever prepared that food did. And you don't know what all is in there. And let's be real, they can post nutrition info. My favorite, actually, I have a story about this one. They can post nutrition information all they want, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be accurate. And to drive that point home, oh man, this is one of my favorites. So I remember seeing a little nutrition info thing on one of the, I don't remember which area it was. It was in the middle. It's all I remember. It was in the middle section. It wasn't on the perimeter. And it was like, oh, there's bread pudding here. And they said that the bread pudding had 15 grams of protein per serving. As a dietitian now, what did you put in that bread pudding to make it have 15 grams of protein per serving? Like, sign a brother up for that. Like, what in like, some of the counts were just completely wrong. Like, absolutely egregiously wrong. Like, I'd go in there and it'd be like, oh, look, there's a tortilla. And it would say the tortilla was like 12 grams of carbs, but it was really one of those 30 grams of carbs tortillas. So whoever was making these nutrition facts was not with it, was not a dietitian. I don't know what the situation was. Maybe they were getting it from somewhere else. Regardless, the numbers were not accurate. So when I used their numbers, my blood sugars would bounce all over the place. When I didn't use their numbers, they were a little better, but they still bounced all over the place. Not helpful. So, like I said, 8.6 at the end of the first year, which was not great at all. Didn't feel very good. Concentration wasn't there, and my blood sugars were constantly bouncing up and down. And 8.6, to put in perspective, for roughly what your average blood sugar is, we're talking in the 190s. That is not great. And from a long-term standpoint, that's really not great, right? Because that puts you at a legitimate risk. If you were to hold your A1C there for a long time, that puts you at legitimate risk of ending up with complications. And I'm admitting all of this because, you see now, gratefully, I've gotten my stuff together and I've been able to become a dietitian and diabetes educator and turn things around. But there was once a time where 18, 19-year-old Ben did not have this at his disposal. And this is what happened. And as a result of all of this, I was fed up. My A1C was terrible partway through the second semester. And straight up, I went to the administration. I was like, I need to have a kitchen. Like, I need to be able to cook my own food because this is getting ridiculous. My blood sugars are bouncing up and down more than a ping pong ball. My graphs, if I had them, would resemble the Rocky Mountains. And this is not fair to me as a person living with diabetes. And they started to put me through the absolute ringer. They're like, well, we acknowledge your request, but basically, in a nutshell, we're not going to do anything until you give us a doctor's note. Give them a doctor's note. Well, we're not going to do anything because you may not have the credits to get into an upper class dorm where they have the kitchens. And I'm like, I actually do, because I came in with a bunch of credit, which was nice. Well, the people you want to live with don't have. I'm like, this is just, like, you're just giving me every possible excuse here. And at the end of the day, none of this solves the fact that I need a kitchen. And so, needless to say, you're gonna love this. So, if my memory serves correct, two things happened. First thing was they pretty much had a 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because they knew I was going to keep on pressing them. And they pretty much were like, okay, cool. They had me listed in like 2 different dorms at the same time with my group of people I was going to live with. And one of the dorms on one end didn't have a kitchen. One of the dorms did have a kitchen. And the implication was, because I was supposed to be staying for part of the summer term, like there's 2 summer sessions, each of them are like 6 weeks. The implication was, let's see your data after the first summer session. If your blood sugars are good when you're cooking your own food, suddenly we may be able to, permit you getting a kitchen. And this is kind of just the implication. I was like, okay, fine. So I was up for the challenge and I went up, showed out, and my A1C was under 7. And so then they were, oh, okay, well, you need to speak with our dietitian that we have on our staff. And so I asked them, I was like, okay, cool. When can I meet with this dietitian? And no one said anything. And then, it gets a couple of weeks later. When can I meet with this dietitian? Nobody said anything. Turned out the little school I was at, which is now ironically doubled in size, which is hilarious. But at the time, they didn't have a dietitian on staff. So I think they were trying to bluff to get me to go away. And the moral of the story was, I basically got off on a technicality showing my blood sugars were better when I had a kitchen, when I had access to making my own meals, counting my own carbs, measuring my own food, and eating on a time that was appropriate for me. And then second, they didn't have someone for me to talk to, and I didn't go away. So they kind of defaulted, and I ended up getting my kitchen, which was amazing because shockingly, my blood sugars were never that bad again. I don't think that's remotely a coincidence at all. Being able to make my own food and suddenly my blood sugars got better. So, like I mentioned, there's a patient right now going through a very similar situation. Difference is they have not backed down, and they have a dietitian on staff who's an absolute potato from what I can tell. And the dietitian doesn't understand that timing of meals matters. And so something I really want to bring up, and why I'm bringing this up in an episode, is first, if you are on campus, you live on campus, in any capacity, do everything in your power to be able to cook your own meals and not be at a disadvantage. If they say, oh, there's a community kitchen, that's not the same thing. There's no sterilization. There's no way to clean it yourself. That should not be a situation if you're on campus. Like, you should be able to have in your dorm your own kitchen with your own food where you can store it and nobody's going to try to take it and all of that. But the other thing here, in thinking about all the different aspects of this, right? Why did it make such a difference? Well, think about it, right? You're not limited to the hours where the thing is open. What if it's not open and you need to eat at that time? What if your class schedule doesn't allow you to eat at a certain time and you need to have flexibility? Well, if you have your own kitchen, you can eat when you want to. You can also store things where you want to and have the convenience of prepping your meals in advance. You have the convenience to say, hey, I'm going to have blank and then I'm going to freeze it and then I can thaw it out, or I can, make this on the go when I'm in a really big crunch during finals. It basically opens up a lot of doors within the scheduling for you. Plus, carb counting is so much simpler. Protein and fat counting so much simpler, because remember, there was a bread pudding that was listed with a ton of protein, like a high protein option. Yes, there's a little bit of protein in bread pudding because it technically has bread, so therefore it's going to be some. But some of these numbers were just absolutely asinine. And in a case like this, if you can't trust the numbers, you're having to go off of your own, ability, which, don't get me wrong, these days, gratefully, we're able to show people how to do that constantly and within, 5-10% error, but there's still a pretty large margin for error. And you're effectively eating out every single time you have a meal, which, if you've had diabetes for longer than about a month, you probably know that eating out can be one of the biggest challenges for people living with diabetes in a nutshell, because you don't know what's in the food. And then you need to basically make your best educated, not even guess, but just best educated decision based on what you're able to assess. And doing that 3 times, 4 times a day, every single day, gets to be exhausting on top of your course load, on top of your clubs, on top of your social life, etc. And so people with diabetes are already having to make 180 unique decisions per day on top of everything else they're trying to do. The last thing that needs to happen is having yet another hurdle. That's something that other students aren't impacted by at all. And that's the biggest issue from a education standpoint. So back to the patient, the dietitian had said to them, oh, well, come in at the less populated hours in the dining hall. Like, that doesn't work. First off, it doesn't work for the class schedule. But second off, you can't tell somebody, oh, eat your meals at, ready for it, 10:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and then 8:30 p.m. Like, that doesn't work, not just from a scheduling perspective or a logistical standpoint, but like, talk about a skewed eating pattern. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all for anybody. And with diabetes, especially now, there is the ability to have some flexibility, but it shouldn't be a, this is when you get to eat because we decide when you get to eat situation. This should be a, hey, it's really not that hard. It's one student. Maybe there's 2 or 3 in the whole school, right? Oh, there's 1 or 2 students. Give them what they need with the access to a kitchen and be done with it, because there should be a level playing field when it comes to education, right? All of these schools are preaching equity among students and the ability to everyone have the same starting opportunity, and you start here and everyone's here and you can get anywhere you want to go and you have all the tools you need right here on campus. If that's the case, why are we not giving the people that need a kitchen, right? Why did I need to jump through 17 hoops and then get off on a technicality just for the purpose of not being on some potato meal plan? Literally, I remember they had given the kitchen, and I still had, for that first semester during the technicality time frame, this was, I think, my sophomore year, I had the kitchen. I still had my minimal meal plan that I was finally able to get off, because during that semester was when they finally admitted they didn't have a dietitian on staff and they were pissed off I didn't go away. But it's like, why would you put somebody through such an extra amount of stress and strain when there's already so many pieces of that going on within diabetes in general? I mean, you've seen the stats probably. People with diabetes are more likely to be anxious and more likely to have depression. There's already so many things that are working against somebody living with diabetes. And on top of the fact that it's technically an invisible disease, right? You don't outwardly see someone and say, oh, they've got diabetes, they've got type 1. Like, it doesn't work like that. And then on top of that, you have all of the misinformation, but all the people who have type 2 that they get confused with the type 1s, and everybody's mixed and matched. And, oh, you don't have diabetes, you're not obese, or you don't have diabetes because you haven't had an amputated leg or whatever. So there's already so much out there that is incorrect. So you're having to battle that. You're having to battle that stigma. And then you're having your university that, by the way, you are paying, I don't know how much money they're going for these days, but I would imagine tens of thousands of dollars per semester, and then potentially 10,000 plus to live on this campus, to then be told what you can and cannot eat. That feels absolutely ridiculous to me. And I don't know about you, but maybe my head is in the clouds and I'm in Delulu land. But the last I checked, if you're paying an institution, I don't know, let's make up a number, $30,000 a year, plus another $15,000 to live on a campus, shouldn't you have the right to pick what you want to eat and when you want to eat it? Like, that just feels so odd to me. I've seen the stats, and I'm sure you've seen them, where they've already talked about how much the tuitions have gone up and how much everything else has increased. Why would it be such a big deal for a student with diabetes to be able to just make their own food? Because quite frankly, as far as I know, the dorms that have the kitchens are likely going to be more expensive anyway. So you're going to offset the cost by them having a more expensive dorm. Like, I don't understand. And again, maybe this is just me on my soapbox and I'm salty from, however many years ago, over a decade ago, of having to go through all these steps. But at the end of the day, from an advocacy standpoint for people with diabetes, you have to be willing to speak up and not back down when it comes to getting the needs that you want, whether that's testing accommodations, whether that's dorm accommodations, whether that's cooking accommodations, scheduling accommodations. You have to be willing to speak up for what you want and what your needs are so you can thrive and be the best version of you that you can be. Because at the end of the day, nobody is going to do it for you. And I wish that weren't the case, but unless you stand up for you, nobody else is going to take the lead and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this for you because I can. It's very rare you're going to find that. And ultimately, people are just going to completely avoid it or forget. And even when it comes to, accommodations in general, I would say, and again, this is personal experience, but also professionally, I would say if you have diabetes, I would try to get accommodations with the testing center at the university. If you're in school or if you're in high school, get a 504 plan, right? There should be something in place because, again, level playing field. If you have a low blood sugar or a high blood sugar during a test, is it fair for you to be functioning at, a fraction of your normal brain capacity while everybody else is doing totally fine? I don't think so. I remember during one of my AP tests, I went to like 45. I had no idea why it even happened. Again, before CGMs, before everything else. I had to sit for almost an hour before I could go restart the test again and get my train of thought back. That should not have happened, right? That's not fair as a person with diabetes, but thankfully I had the accommodations, so I was able to do that without any sort of repercussion. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to speak up for what your needs are. And you have to not just stop at the first sign of resistance. And as people with diabetes, we run into walls all the time, right? We're out here, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. Or you put in a site, oh, it wasn't great. Or, you test your number, oh, it's higher than I wanted it to be. But you cannot just fold when the moment gets tough. And not just from a day-to-day perspective, it's already hard enough to do that. But when it comes to the external world trying to tell you what you can and can't do, you cannot just fold and say, you know what? I tried, it's over, it's done, I'll just adapt. You can, but if it's not what's best for you in the short and long run, all you are doing is ultimately hamstringing yourself and putting yourself in a more difficult situation that you did not have to be in because you're covered under the American with Disabilities Act if you have type 1 diabetes. And while there's not a ton of perks about having diabetes at all, like, by all means, I don't want to say take advantage, but utilize the small amount of perks and accommodations that you ultimately have. I'm not out here advocating for, oh, you didn't study for the test? Well, say your number's low and go study in the bathroom. Like, no, I'm not advocating for that whatsoever. But what I am advocating for is be able to make the playing field level for you, because nothing pains me more than working with someone who's in college or in grad school or, taking some sort of exam. They're struggling because they have a low blood sugar during an exam. And then the professor just doesn't care because they don't need to care because there's 700 other students and they're like, oh, you're just one of 700. It's your problem, not mine. And that's not fair to you as a student. So Make sure you are advocating for what your needs are. I don't care if the school has 2,000 people. I don't care if the school has 200,000 people, which I don't think any universities do, but that is besides the point. Regardless of the size of the institution, advocate for yourself because nobody else is going to do that. In the case of the current patient, my fingers are crossed that we're able to get through and figure things out. But ultimately, as you saw from my situation, I did not back down. That stretched on for me for about 6 or 7 months. And finally, they were able to relent and said, hey, we'll give you what you need. I got what I needed. I got off of that meal plan, and magically my blood sugars were perfectly fine. And it was glorious and it was fantastic. And then, eventually moved off campus. It wasn't a big deal. But at the end of the day, when it comes to things like this, you have to be able to advocate for yourself as a person living with diabetes. I don't know how else to say it nicer. I don't think there's a nicer way to say it, but that is my big thing here. My big takeaway: be willing to advocate, be willing to educate, and do not stop at the first, second, or third sign of resistance. Make sure you are able to get what you need. And don't be afraid to escalate if you need to when it comes to, moving up the chain and talking to somebody who's higher up, and until you reach the dean potentially, who knows? But hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully they're able to get your accommodations where you need them to be. I hope you found this helpful, whether you're in school or you have a child who might be in school or a sibling who might be in school. So let me know if it did. Shoot me over a message at ManofZeel, ManofTzeel, over on Instagram or TikTok. And if you're loving the podcast, it would mean the world to me if you dropped a 5-star wherever you are listening, whether that is on Spotify, whether that is on Apple. I'm really grateful to be able to share this knowledge and wisdom with you. With this, I will see you in the next episode.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.